for me, it's much more about continuing to have conversations with people that I admire and respect and that I want to get to know. Some folks are an easy yes, and some folks I chase them and they either ignore me or say no, and that's fine. It is what it is. If you're never getting a no, then you're not trying hard enough.
And how can podcasting become a powerful tool for growing your brand, engaging your audience, and amplifying your message? I'm Sadaf Bainan, and this is PodJunction Podcast, where we explore how entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders use podcasting to grow their brands, build authority, and connect with their audience. Today's guest knows all about using storytelling to create real impact online. So meet Josh Klemons, a digital storyteller and strategist and founder of Reverb Communications. He helps brands and campaigns tell their stories online. Josh also hosts two podcasts, Hello Merge Tag, where social media and politics intersect, and Step Up Your Social, a podcast about digital marketing and social media strategy. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to talk podcasts with you.
Awesome. It's been a while. I know we've been planning this for a bit.
Yeah. You caught me during my busy season because I work, a lot of my work is in politics. And, hence Hello Merge Tag. And I think y'all first reached out and I was like in the thick of it. And then, yeah, as soon as things quieted down, we got to schedule something. So yeah, excited to be here.
So Josh, you have built a career around helping people engage, influence, and grow through digital content. I'm really curious to know how your podcasts, Hello Merge Tag and Step Up Social, fit into the overall business strategy at Reverb Communications. So wondering if you could share the story behind your podcasts and how, and the role they play in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a huge podcast nerd. I love podcasts. I've been listening to them for years. And a while back, I decided, that I saw a purpose for me to start my first podcast, Step Up Your Social. Step Up Your Social, all the episodes are short, 10 minutes or less, and they provide quick, actionable tips to take your digital marketing to the next level. I intend, although in the world of digital marketing, intention is irrelevant, I intend to make them all evergreen, but that's just not always possible. So there are some that are not as relevant today, but my goal there was to create less about like an ongoing community than to create like a backlog of content that people like that answer questions. So I do a ton of public speaking. I work with a ton of clients as a consultant. And I found that I was regularly teaching people the same thing over and over, which is great. I mean, that's part of what I do. And so I just found that like there was an easy way for me to like put those into, writing / podcast format so that folks can like learn with me and then go and like dig deeper. So it's a really nice when I go do a public speaking gig, I will regularly be able to say, I have a whole episode on this if you'd like to learn more, so it's like, I only have an hour with you and we're spending 5 minutes on this topic, but I went deeper in this episode. And so I'm regularly able to refer back to Step Up Your Social. And that was really my intention for creating it. I don't create those on any kind of schedule. I sometimes I'll do a bunch in a couple months and then I kind of won't do any for a while, just depending on how busy I am. But they're a really nice way for me to sort of dig in. And some of them are kind of like fun. Like I did one about 7 times the airlines blew it and what we can learn from their mistakes. And then some of them are much more practical, like understanding the 3 different types of audiences available to you in Facebook advertising. So, different kind of ways to think about it. And again, I really created that as a way to just like help the people I was already working with learn more and obviously reach new audiences. But I was much more focused on the folks I was already working with to like be able to dig in. The second podcast was specific to politics and social media. So I work in politics. I mentioned about 2/3 of my work is in the progressive political space. I work with candidates, campaigns, brands, all kinds of orgs to move the needle online. And there are podcasts focused on politics, a lot of them. And there are podcasts focused on social media, a lot of them, but there weren't a lot. I don't know that there were none, but there certainly weren't many that were really focused on the intersection of those two. And so that podcast, is almost always, not exclusive, but almost always conversations with people in the field. So I've sat down with Congress people and state senators and state assembly people, but also like Dan Pfeiffer from Pod Save America and influencers online. I just recently sat down with a guy who gets 3 billion views a year across his channels to talk about how he approaches the internet. And really just trying to help folks like think differently about that intersection of social and politics. And yeah, so that project came about maybe a year and a half ago. And I've been having it's a ton of work, which I'm sure you know all about. And I'm sure your listeners do as well. But I've been having a ton of fun with that, getting to meet really cool people, have really interesting conversations. And yeah, it's been a really gratifying process. A lot of work, but a lot of fun. So.
Awesome. I want to ask you first about what you were saying about Step Up Social, about your 10-minute topical types of episodes. How do you choose those? How do you choose the topics?
Yeah. So every episode is 10 minutes or less. That's sort of my guarantee, because a lot of folks, I actually wanted to call it Flash Social, but that name just like wasn't available readily. But that was the idea, was like, I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of them are long, but sometimes it's nice to just have like a quick thing you can like listen to on a walk, or, when you're on a quick drive. And so that was the intention. And the majority of those episodes, not all, but the majority came directly from things that I was already talking about with clients or public speaking. So I was regularly talking about like the difference between Facebook audiences for advertising, customs, lookalike, and saved. I've explained the difference in those three things maybe a million times in my life, and I'm happy to do it. I could do it right now, no question. But I wanted to go deeper in a way that like I don't have time necessarily in like a presentation where I'm covering all of Facebook advertising. So using it as a way where folks can like go back and like listen, like, oh, and again, my intention for those is to be evergreen. Like I want those to all be relevant forever. But then Twitter goes and like removes its analytic tools unless you're paying. Facebook kills off pages to watch. So it's like, it is what it is. They're not always going to be evergreen just because the world of digital marketing changes so readily. But that is my intention with those episodes, is to make sure that like you could go dig through all of those episodes today and enjoy them. I just did one about like what's blue sky and should your brand be on it? It's like, so there's not one answer. It's usually like I have a lot of times it's like I'm an avid blogger, and I think regularly like I have a blog idea, and if I think it'll make more sense in an audio format, it might become an episode of Step Up. I don't know if this is something you want to talk about, but I have a very specific strategy I use for SEO purposes with I'll just spell it out simply, and then we can talk about it if you want. Every one of my podcast episodes becomes a standalone blog post. Every one across both podcasts. But then I also have standalone landing pages for both blog posts, and they all link to each other. So if you go to my website, you can see under content that I have 2 podcasts and a whole separate standalone newsletter separate from my like traditional, my personal newsletter, that's focused only on free digital tools. Everything is standalone. Like you have to want to opt into each of those things, but I use them as a way, like I blog regularly, and a huge part of my blogging strategy essentially over the years has become every time I release a new podcast episode, I drop a blog. And with Step Up Your Social, I have full transcripts, which has been invaluable for SEO. Like it's helped my SEO tremendously. With Hello Merge Tag, I'm not doing full transcripts, but I'm having backlinks and folks are sharing it. So, like both of them are good for SEO, which I assume a lot of your audience cares about, and happy to talk more about that.
Yeah. So carry on. That's
so essentially every time I create an episode, I create a standalone blog post, but then that links to like listen to all episodes at stepupyoursocial.com or hellomergetag.com. And then if you go to either of those, you can find a full list of every episode. So again, the whole thing's like a big circle. It takes you from one to the other and back. And I'm a big advocate that the easier it is for people to navigate your website, the better. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. Obviously you can also listen to both podcasts any place you stream, but if you're looking for, every episode, I have them laid out very easy to find at stepupyoursocial.com and hellomergetag.com.
Is that something that evolved, or did you do that right from the get-go?
Right from the get-go. Yeah,
right?
I've been blogging for 10 years and podcasting for maybe 3 or 4. It was just very natural when I was trying to think about how to organize this all and make it easy for like the listener. I didn't want them to have to like search. And if you just have a landing page, which I think a lot of folks do, especially if it's just like one piece of their larger strategy, you don't get any of the keywords in there. Like it's very hard to like think about more than just listing them. So it's a ton of extra work. For me, creating even the 10-minute episodes is a ton of work because I have to I create transcripts for those because I find just talking, I'm very comfortable just talking, but when it's just me on the audio, like I want it to be perfect. So I typically write those out, record them, then create the blog post. It's like a whole process. With Hello Merge Tag also, I summarize them. I try to like do takeaways, what we covered. But I just found that it was a much easier way for me to think about how to give like the summation. And I really like having the transcripts when possible. for ADA compliance, but also for SEO purposes. But with
Yeah.
Hello Merge Tag, I'm not doing that. I'm giving some takeaways and letting folks dive in if they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're repurposing the content as well, isn't it? Which is
Exactly.
great.
Yeah. So like the one podcast episode also becomes a blog post, also becomes social content, and whatnot.
Have you had any customers come to you through your podcast or your blogs?
I think that, so I do a lot of blogging. I create a lot of videos. Like I TikTok daily, and then create tons of social content. I don't know that I've ever gotten a new client from Step Up Your Social, but I know that I've had clients come back to me and like, I think I have built my entire business on the back of content. I'm a huge content marketer. Right. I was content marketing before I knew that phrase. Like I got into the business and I started blogging and then I started doing social. And then, it's just like anything I could do to add value to the world. I'm like a huge advocate that like businesses that add value succeed. And I was just doing that before I even had business. Like I didn't have it. I mean, this is 10 years ago, but I didn't have any clients, but I was just putting content out into the world. And like, absolutely, without question, content has brought me a ton of my clients, but like, I'm not creating it for the clients, but it helps, it sort of works together. So I don't know that I've ever had somebody be like, I just listened to Step Up Your Social and now I want to hire you, but I've definitely been able to keep the relationships going. So like, I'll go to a public speaking gig and I'll tell people to go check it out. And I could see a big jump. Like somebody went and listened to 4 or 5 episodes and then they joined my mailing list. And then, so you never know, like I do track like how I find clients. But sometimes you don't really know, somebody writes you because they're like, I found you on Google, but like, not really. They found me on Google because they had like come to my website 5 times in the last 3 months. And then they Googled, social media expert or whatever. And Google was like, I have good SEO, but also like Google remembers that you've checked out my website and like spent 20 minutes listening to 2 podcast episodes. So I think that there's like, it's hard sometimes to quantify the benefits of putting content in the world, but I can say definitively, I built my entire business on the back of it.
That's great. So Josh, how would you say your podcasts compare to your other content formats? So your social media, your blogs, your videos?
So I'm a big advocate that content should fit the platform. So I am active on at least half a dozen social platforms. I have this newsletter called Free Digital Tools. I have 2 podcasts. I blog. I do a ton of stuff, but like not everything fits everywhere. And if you're trying to cram it in, it's not going to work and people are going to feel that. So like on TikTok, I'm regularly posting political content and like that stuff doesn't make it anywhere on my website for the most part. I mean, bits and pieces, but very little. And then, again, I like sometimes I'll have a blog post and realize, what, this could be a good podcast episode and I'll recreate it as a podcast. But more often than not, it's like one or the other. And then of course I repurpose. So like I mentioned, every podcast episode becomes a blog, but not every blog becomes a podcast episode for sure.
Have you seen your podcasts open doors to collaborating or collaborations that you didn't expect?
Hello Merge Tag has helped me connect with a whole bunch of people that who I knew, but they didn't know me or, Hello Merge Tag has absolutely made it easier for me to connect with people in my space that I'm excited to be connected with. Let's put it that way. I've gotten to meet some really cool people through it. I've gotten to deeper my relationships with people I already knew. Like for example, just recently, there's a guy whose content I read all the time and he wrote a really interesting piece and I reached out and invited him on the podcast to continue the conversation. He said yes. And so I got to read a thing on the internet that I liked and then host the guy who wrote it to continue the conversation. That's a pretty special thing to do. And like, I'm not unique in that sense, but podcasts are pretty unique in that sense. Hey, will you write a guest blog post for me is not going to get the same kind of response as, hey, will you come on my podcast? So, it's a really cool way that I got to open a door to like connect with somebody. And, it's good for him because he got an opportunity to like think through what he was writing about, but it's good for me because I get to like be part of that conversation and I learn from him and, get to share that with my audience.
That's awesome. Josh, it's clear that your podcasts play a big role in your broader strategy for Reverb Communications. But as with anything worth its time, it comes with its own set of challenges and hurdles. So I'm interested to know what that was like for you when you were launching your podcast, especially the Step Up one, because that was your first one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So Step Up Your Social, the episodes are short. I'm recording it on stuff I already have. I was recording it right into GarageBand. I bought a good mic, but other than that, there wasn't a huge financial investment, but there was a lot of learning. How do I host this thing? How do I get it online? But a huge part of my job, as a digital marketing consultant is staying ahead of the curve so that I can teach my clients. So I went out and I learned how to create a podcast, in part because I wanted a podcast and in part because I wanted to be able to help clients create podcasts. And since that time, I've helped several clients create podcasts, so it made me more valuable to my clients because now I knew exactly, I knew how to help somebody go out and do what I had done. Whereas, without my expertise, these clients would have been, stuck in Google. I will say, I started in Google. I found some really valuable Facebook communities that I was able to learn from folks there. And then again, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but there's some things like, how do you host a podcast? How do you actually get it on Apple? You're not going to learn that from listening to podcasts unless it's a podcast about podcasting. But those answers are out there. They've been asked a million times. You just have to know how to find them. And a lot of this has been, learning as I go, as with everything I do in a space that's constantly changing. I am constantly learning as I go. And that's true for podcasts, just like it's true for, everything. I mean, I'm literally doing things today that didn't exist 10 years ago. There was no such thing as TikTok when I started my business.
Yeah.
And now I post on it every day. So, it's just a question of keeping up with the field.
Yeah. I mean, experience speaks volumes, doesn't it? And you've been in the trenches. So as you said, it's easier to then show others the ropes.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So what would you say were some of the biggest hurdles in all of that?
For me, it's time. If I had 5 more hours in the day, I would be podcasting and blogging three to 5 times more often. I love doing it, genuinely. I have a massive document of things that I would like to create content around. I just don't have that. As I'm sure many of your listeners know, especially if they're using podcasts as a way to grow their business, I'm constantly stuck between growing, working on my clients and growing my own business. And this is one of those growing my business pieces that, it's harder to do. I will say it's easier for me to make time for Hello Merge Tag because once I've scheduled the interview, it's going to happen. Whereas Step Up Your Social, I've had an idea for an episode of that I think is going to be great. It's been on the back burner for 2 years. I open the doc, I close it. It's I've got it charted, but it's just for context. And I'm sure there are AI tools that would make some of this easier, but I use AI tools, but I also not so much for podcasting. I have to write. I have to know what I want to say. If I could just talk into the mic, but it's got to be under 10 minutes. So I got to get to the heart of it and I have to do it succinctly. So I typically will write and edit the draft, record it, which takes well more than 10 minutes. You got to recreate stuff and whatever, pull up the intro, the outro, all that, then drop it so that it's live. Then I create a blog post. Then I need a graphic to do that. And then I share it on social. So, that whole process can easily be 3 to 4 hours minimum for a 10-minute episode. So it's worth noting with Hello Merge Tag, where I'm doing interviews, I would say it's significantly more than 3 to 4 hours because I have to connect with the guests. I have to research to be prepared. A huge part of what I'm doing is asking good questions, right? I am there to be a good asker of questions. Then I have to edit the episode down because there's always at least something that has to come out. Even the best guest, says something and starts over or whatever. Sometimes I have to edit them significantly. Usually I have to edit them a little bit. Then the blog post, then the social, the graphics. So it's a huge process. And certainly I could outsource some of that, but honestly, I have a hard time outsourcing some of this because it's such I'm sure I could find somebody that could edit my episodes, but because of the political nature, it can be hard to know what you're listening for if you're not immersed in this world. So I have found it much more daunting to think about outsourcing. I'm sure if I hired a consultant and said, how can I do this easier? The first thing they would say is don't edit your own episodes. But frankly, I don't trust anybody else to do it at the moment because they're hard conversations and I'm having in-depth political conversations. And if you're not paying attention to politics, you might not understand oh, we should not have said that. Or, oh, you definitely, need to leave that in, even though maybe he didn't say it as perfectly as he might have or, whatnot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. With the other ones, the Step Up socials, do you batch record those?
No.
No.
No, I typically, I've thought about it. I've been I'm going to do 5 this month or this week. But I just, it's enough time to do one. It's not easier for me to do 2 together than it is for me to do 1 and then just do it again. I have lots of ideas. And when I have time, I just try to pull out the script and write it. The hardest part is typically getting the script from my head onto paper so that I can get going.
Yeah. Was there ever a time when you wanted to quit? Because it was too much?
No, I love it. I mean, but again, with Step Up Your Social, and frankly, with both of them, I'm not on a schedule for either. which makes it a lot easier. Like I work in politics, and 4 months heading into November last year I was drowning in work, and you can tell. You can go check out my podcast list. I made very few. And since November, I have made like 10 episodes, like now that I have time, I'm drowning in them in a good way. Like I'm loving it. But, so like the fact that I never committed to doing every Thursday, and nobody's expecting that. So it makes it a lot easier. I absolutely think I would grow faster if I committed to doing every Thursday, but it's not my goal, and it's not my process. I would need to change. My business would have to change dramatically for me to like commit to doing these weekly. And my audience, it's just not the kind of audience I'm building right now. That could change in the future. And again, most of the podcasts I listen to publish regularly. Mine doesn't. And it is what it is. For me, it's much more about adding value into the world than like creating a schedule. You know what I mean? So like, there's no reason to quit because I can take 6 months off if I need to.
Yeah. Which is nice, that freedom.
Absolutely. Like I hadn't done a Step Up Your Social episode in quite some time before my most recent one, which I did in January about Blue Sky. And but I still promote it that I have a podcast because it's still out there. And again, those episodes are evergreen and ready to go. It's not like we're talking about an episode of television that was 6 months old, which I listen to podcasts like that. I say that with love, not anything else. But it's just different. Like they're evergreen. Like you can listen to it forever.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Josh, looking ahead, where do you see your podcast going in the next year or so?
Yeah, it's a good question. I just had some pretty big jumps, I think, for Hello Merge Tag. I've had a couple really interesting guests, and I got I had like a couple big things happen on the podcast as far as like just pulling folks in and like having some bigger conversations. I don't know. Again, it would be like me saying like, where's my blogging going to be in a year? I don't know. Just more of it. Like, I don't think about, again, there are plenty of people out there who are trying to make a living as a podcast host. I am not one of those people. Like, I do have a sponsor for one of my podcasts that came to me. I wasn't seeking it, but it worked out. It was a great fit, or I would have said no. But for me, it's much more about, continuing to have conversations with people that I admire and respect and that I want to get to know. And also like bringing folks that live in my world at that intersection of social media and politics, behind the door. And like I'm getting smarter and the listeners are getting smarter at the same time because the guests are like, I'm finding guests that are just so knowledgeable and so smart, which is also a challenge. Like those folks are also very busy and it can be hard. Some folks are an easy yes, and some folks I chase them and, they either ignore me or say no. And that's fine. It is what it is. Like if you're never getting a no, then you're not trying hard enough, like I could easily get there are a lot of people that I would love to have, and I tracked all my guests, and I have a whole lot of people that have just like either ignored me or said no, but I've had some amazing guests on, and I've got some more lined up and, excited to see where it goes. But yeah, I've never really thought about my business as far as like, what's it going to look like in a year? Cause I'm just kind of like, I just keep going and it just keeps working and having fun with it in the process.
Yeah. Why fix something that isn't broken, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think also, even though you're not trying to, you said, I'm not trying to make money off of being a host, but it's clear that your podcasts are a real powerful marketing tool for your business.
Absolutely. I've had leads come in through it, and I've grown more people know who I am because of this podcast, which is not why I started per se, but I mean, it's nice. I've been able to, there's a lot of more people in my space, who are aware of me. So cool. For me, it was like, I wish somebody else was having these conversations. I would have just been listening, but they weren't. So I was like, fine, I'll do it.
Yeah. So Josh, you said about people in your space. What advice would you give to someone in your space that was thinking about launching a podcast?
Well, in my space particularly, like I'm talking like that intersection of social and digital, or politics and social, don't launch it, just come on mine at this point. But no, to those listening out there who are like on the fence, podcasts are a lot of work. Like anybody who says otherwise hasn't really done this. Like you're hosting a podcast, like you have to coordinate with the guest. You have to prepare for the guest. You have to like then take the episode. You have to do the actual interview. But like there's a ton of value to be had because you're growing your network, and like folks are, if you've got listeners, you don't need, Sean Puri from, My First Million. He says, don't try to be well known, try to be known well. And I think, my podcast, I'm not trying to be Pod Save America. I'm not trying to have 10 million listeners. That wouldn't make sense for what I'm doing. I'd much rather have like a small audience of people that are like really interested in that intersection than like some like mass like maybe one day I'll try to create a podcast that has like mass appeal. That's not what Hello Merge Tag is. It was never my intention. I'm much more interested in having a niche conversation like for my field. And for that, it's been great. So I would say to your listeners who are considering starting a podcast, ask yourself, is your goal to have 3 million listeners? Which like, hell yeah, do it. But like, get ready. It's like saying you want to be famous on the internet. You want to have a huge YouTube channel, like anything. It's freaking hard and not everybody's going to be able to do it. But anybody can become an expert in a niche, like anybody. It's still hard. It's still a ton of work, but there's a lot of value there. Even if, your aunt's never heard you in their iTunes charts or whatever, like you're not going to be like world famous going like niching down. But you don't need to be world famous to be successful. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I love what you said. Try to be known well rather than well known. That's great.
That's Sean Puri from My First Million. He talks about that a lot. That's a podcast I listen to often. Him and Sam Parr talk about like kind of business in a fun way, if you will. And he said that a few times and it really resonated with me. People are trying to be well known. Like you can do dumb things to get well known. Like that doesn't help you in the end. Like you could go run around and be a jerk on the internet and people will know who you are. Yeah. You want to be known well. You want people to think of you first when they see an opportunity or when they like think of like, oh, I have a cool idea. This would be great for Josh. And I have stuff like that happen to me all the time. And I also pass it along constantly. Like somebody comes to me with something, I'm not the right person, or somebody has an idea, how do I do this? I'm like, oh, I got somebody for you, because I'm constantly like building connections with new people. And I've gotten to make like a lot of like really cool connections through this podcast, but also I'm also very active in a bunch of Facebook groups that have done that and Slack communities. There's more than one way to build a network on the internet, Lord knows. But I'm involved in a lot of them and Hello Merge Tag is one of them.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Josh, it's been really fun digging into how you use podcasting, the medium, to grow your business.
Yeah, it's been fun. And if folks want to find them, obviously you can find them wherever you listen to podcasts. But if you go to joshklemons.com/content, you can find both. My name is Josh K. Lemons, like the fruit, joshklemons.com/content. You can find both my podcasts with everyone listed. I also have I mentioned it earlier, I have a newsletter called Free Digital Tools. Every 2 weeks, I share 2 free digital tools. That's it. Like every 2 weeks, 2 free digital tools in your inbox, nothing else. I blog regularly. I have a bunch of free tools you can download or use on my website. And then I'm obviously very active in a lot of social channels. All of that can be found at joshklemons.com/content. And folks should absolutely connect with me. I love talking about this stuff. I never get you will run out of questions before I run out of patience to answer them. I love this stuff. I do it all the time. I love digital marketing and I love the power of the internet to do good. There's a lot of people using the internet to do bad. And I am very much trying to empower those trying to do good in the world. You can see it's enough that I have a sign behind me. It says, let's win the internet. That's like my whole thing is like, let's win the internet. Let's find ways to connect with your audience. Let's find ways to put cool things out into the world. So yeah, connect with me anytime, y'all. And always happy to nerd out with you about podcasts or anything else digital marketing related.
Awesome. That's perfect. And for those tuning in, you'll find all the links and details in the description. Josh, thanks again so much for joining me today and sharing your podcasting journey with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And to everyone else listening, if today's conversation has got you thinking about how podcasting could help you grow your business, I would love to talk to you. So please feel free to reach out to me as well. And from Josh and me, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.